And it is a tremendous opportunity to be here. And so I certainly want to give an honor to Mama Bug as well. Since meeting her years ago, it's just been an incredible connection. And I do feel part of the family, and I operate as such. If I need something, I call her, and vice versa. I just really appreciate you. And also giving honor to my brothers, Wesley and Brother Root as well. And working with them has been just tremendous for me. Being in maternal child health for so long, it is so awesome to meet other men that are committed to supporting our women, our families, and our communities. And so let's just give it up for Rose and Robe right now. So I'm going to do my very best to do what I can here. I've been doing some research in particular, and I will be doing this research for the rest of my life as I approach 60, and I'm getting to a place where I won't have to work for anyone else but myself, and I'll be able to speak as free as I want to. Not that that stopped me 3 decades ago. I've been doing that, but it's just the idea of the freedom of being able to do that. But my research, I think I've been living it, but to get to do it with the expertise I've gathered over the decades of my work, it's really looking at slavery's interruption of Black family formation. And everything that I speak from comes from that place of research, and so this is a great opportunity, and I was really excited with the theme for this year for the Rose Conference: Black breastfeeding and birth justice. You can get comfortable in your seats, and some may get uncomfortable when I speak. I want to share with you things I've learned in my research, share with you some of my ideas, my thoughts. And some of the information may be new to you, some may hurt you. I know that when I do it each and every time, everything in me responds, and so I have my own moment. And I just wanted to warn you ahead of time, but it's okay. And like Dr. Monica said, I love looking back in order to leap forward. It's like the emu bird. How many know what an emu bird is? Right? It looks like an ostrich, really ugly, but I think he's so cute. But the emu doesn't have the ability to walk backwards. So what it does, it looks back to get its bearings, and it's able to propel itself 16 to 20 feet ahead of itself. And about over 20 years ago, I learned about the emu bird, and I said, that's the way I've been living my life. I like to look back and see what I need to help me move forward. I don't want to go back. How many know there's some things you want to leave right in the past? But it's so important to look back in order to leap forward, and that's why I think history is so important as we really are in this work of moving everyone forward. So who's my timekeeper? Because I'm going to go as quickly as I can, but I need to know. Can you let me know when I have like 10 minutes left? Oh, you got 15, that'll work. Oh, she got the bright green sign. You came prepared, ready. Like those game shows, you came ready to play. But don't play with you at the time, I got you. All right, so let's see if this works. So again, my topic is Black Mama's Milk Taken, the legacy of slavery's impact on Black family formation. And again, it's wonderful to be here for Black Breastfeeding Week, and we also give honor to the founders of that. And I love their theme for this year: a new foundation for lactation support is built on racial equity, cultural empowerment, and community engagement, and it's powered by the collective resilience. My presentation will share lots of art. I'll share with you some of my own creative ability and when I do spoken word. And if that's okay, that Kenn can just be Kenn, give me a round of applause. All right. So here's all of me as best I can do for today. Also want to start with these echoes, and this is a print by Paul Goodnight. My parents knew him growing up, and I love his work, but it's called Echoes. And again, when I speak, I can't help but hear the echoes of those who came before me, so I will honor them always when I do this work, and some of the folks are still in the room. Go ahead. Go ahead, I heard the applause. For all the words that were spoken, and we set it off yesterday, operationalizing reproductive justice with Dr. Monica. And again, you're going to hear from Dr. Joya soon, and again, the others that have spoken before me. And so again, a lot of what I'm saying is certainly built on what you've heard from them. This talk will examine the root causes of the disruptions in Black family formation and the impact on the legacy of enslavement in America that persists today. And I like definitions just like Dr. Monica. So when I say disrupt, The definition is to alter, destroy, causing disturbance. And how many have felt that in your own family because of racism? It's about damage to the black family that destroyed the structure. It's about stopping the continuous progress of a people. This disruption is also about interrupting the formation of strong black families. And I put more there because, let's be clear, I came from a strong black family, so we're not all deficits when we talk about black families, but they tried to interrupt the formation of more of what we know is right. And let's remember what we got from Dr. Monica. This was great when I saw her slide, but talking about social determinants of health are the result of policy decisions, and those health disparities arise from the structural racism, and the health inequities persist because of structural racism. Let's give her another hand, because that was great. So just a few things of what I'm trying to get at today, again, is to give us a better understanding of this legacy, how it impacts black health outcomes, and the potency of racism that influences and drives the disparities that we've been seeing in black breastfeeding. I'm going to examine our dark past and the history of the enslavement of Africans to provide context and perspective on black family formation and survival today. I want to make the case for black motherhood and maternal child health and lift up the voices of black women, mothers, and birthing persons. My goal really is to inspire us to think better about a brighter and equitable future for black families in America. I want to start with black breastfeeding. Black breastfeeding. Is there something special about black breastfeeding? I say yes. Yes, there's something unique about black breastfeeding, and there are several somethings that I would like to hit at. And I would start with this poem by Hess Love that was in Upworthy. I wished I dried up. I wish every drop of my milk slipped past those pink lips and nourished the ground, where the bones lay my babies starved while I fed the murderer. I wish I dried up so the Mrs. babies would dry up too and be brittle, so I could crumble them to dust, return them to the ground, where all children of my bosom lay equal. Whitewash history dismisses the traumatic experience of black women wet nursing their enslavers' babies. Cultural myths and the aftermath of slavery and wet nursing give breastfeeding an additional layer of shame in the black community. This pain has to stop, not just with our women, our mothers, our sisters, our aunties, our neighbors, even the burden that our men also carry for our families and our communities that we find ourselves challenged to help and support and cover. This stop that I mean is stop the shame, stop the trauma, stop the oppression, and stop the pain. In doing fatherhood work, we always quote from Frederick Douglass that it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. My child is not going to be as strong and vibrant as they can be if they're denied the milk of their mother and other safeties in my community. If our children are truly going to be strong, we have to build and restore fatherhood as well, especially in black families. But there's an urgency to preserve black motherhood. So when I began my research into black motherhood and breastfeeding, it got very deep for me, and it continues to get deep as I do research even within my family, my mother, my grandmother, my wife's mother, her grandmother, and their sisters and aunties and others. It gets really, really deep because you see, and we've been talking about, the disparities and equities. We talk about poverty, structural, institutional, all of those things, and even further, the MCH system's exclusion of us before and still now, the systemic barriers that we hear about, the bounty on black bodies, incarceration of black bodies, men and women in this country, this legacy of slavery. What I've learned in my research about black breastfeeding it's been a story of exploitation, rape, violence, brutality, cruelty, oppression, robbery. And the word stolen stuck out for me so many times. To take another person's property without permission or legal right and without intending to return it. Her milk was stolen. Theft. the taking of another person's personal property with the intent of depriving that person of use of their property, depriving our children, depriving her of the power to feed her own child. And we call it larceny as well, a crime that involves unlawful taking or theft of personal property of another person or business. It's an offense. That's the part that I like. I'm offended that they did that. I'm offended that they do that. And women of color experience what they experience in visits all across, in hospital rooms, visits across the country. I'm offended. It is an offense. And so this relationship of the medical system to slavery is so well documented. The legacies of slavery today are seen in structural racism that has resulted in the disproportionate maternal and infant death among African Americans. It can be traced. The deep roots of these patterns of disparity in maternal and infant health lie in the commodification of enslaved black women's childbearing and physicians' investment in serving the interests of slave owners. Even certain medical specializations, such as obstetrics and gynecology, owed a debt to enslaved women who became experimental subjects in the development of the field. As we think about things, our initiatives must acknowledge these historical legacies by addressing institutionalized racism and implicit bias in medicine while promoting programs that remedy socially embedded disparities. And I like the timeline that we've been given for this conference, but I want to zero in on 1662 to 1808. Legal and medical attention to enslaved women's bodies played an especially important role in the entrenchment of American racism and its manifestation in public health crisis today. As far back as 1662, colonial Virginia legislators made black women's childbearing a centerpiece of the system of chattel slavery, that when they passed a law stating that the status of a child would follow that of his or her mother. This partus sequitur ventrum legalized slavery as an inheritable status applied to Africans and their descendants. Your body belongs to me, and everything that comes out belongs to me. Literature during this time depicted African women in comparison with European women as especially capable of both childbearing and field labor, justifying, again, the treatment toward these women. Britain and United States banned transatlantic slave in 1807 to 1808. Slaveholders began to bank their future increasingly on the fertility of enslaved women, forcing them to have baby after baby after baby after baby, sometimes subject to rape of their own men. Medical journals reveal growing attention paid by white physicians to enslaved women's reproductive lives. So if we're talking about reproductive justice, we need to get the power back from that white doctor. That's Kenn, sorry. He came right out. I didn't even know he was going to come out like that. He slipped out. Infant mortality in plantation settings remained high, however. In the South, the estimated 50% of enslaved infants were stillborn and died within the first year of life. Although enslaved midwives and nurses supplied much of the daily plantation health care, slave owners called on white physicians for cases such as assisting difficult births with forceps, examining the causes of enslaved women's infertility, or investigating cases of infant mortality. The system was never meant for us to thrive in it. That's important to know. The system was never meant for us to thrive in it. And this is not new either, because Dr. Norman let us know this in the 70s, if you remember, in California. The evolution of the problems of medicine in the ghetto is based on 3.5 centuries of exploitation of society's major minority group. Exploitation of our people has been talked about forever. In his paper, he said the problems are further compounded by the apparent benefit of society in continuing this exploitation, a relative lack of awareness and understanding of the ghetto resident, and an appalling inadequacy of national priorities directed toward their benefit. This was in the 70s, and we still are struggling to do what was called out back then. We need national priorities that are directed toward our benefit. These medical problems are inextricably intertwined with sociological economical, environmental, and political factors that contribute to the dehumanizing and demoralizing of our people. Taken together, present a form and a magnitude that represents one of our society's major injustices and will continue to exist and increase until they receive the appropriate priority and commitments based on sincere and enlightened desires of us all. A wonderful paper by West. Wet nursing is uniquely gendered kind of exploitation. The exploitation of these women, it grieves me, the research I looked at here. But as a form of exploitation specific to slave mothers, enforced wet nursing constituted a distinct aspect of enslaved women commodification. Yet ultimately, white women use wet nursing as a tool to manipulate enslaved women's motherhood for slaveholders' own ends. And people don't talk a lot about her role, white slave owners' wife's role during slavery. Many forms of wet nursing in the past. Under the slavery, wet nursing took on more exploitative angle by exploring these practices in a broader and long-run context of mothers' exploitation across time and space. And under slavery, historians have illuminated power structures that resonate with gendered, racial, and class exploitation, where a woman's race and her status impacted her ability to make choices about her infant feeding. Wet nursing represented this exploitation of slave women. Slave-holding men and women manipulated enslaved women's mothering and their reproductive abilities. Someone in control of your body and everything about it. Some of the research I do, I listen to, there are slave narratives that you can actually, there are audible tapes of folks that were former slaves. And there's an article that I was drawn to and wanted to share here today, and it's from William McWhorter. He did not shy away from clearly explaining the violent context behind enslaved wet nursing following the death of a white mistress. And if you don't mind, I'll go into that character now. My Aunt Mary belonged to Master John Cardrock, and when his wife died and left a little baby, that was little Miss Lucy. Aunt Mary was nursing a new baby of her own, so Master John made her let his baby suck too. If Aunt Mary was feeding her own baby and Miss Lucy started crying, Master John would snatch her baby up by the legs and spank him and tell Aunt Mary to go on and nurse his baby first. Aunt Mary couldn't answer him a word, but my mom says she often seed Aunt Mary cry till the tears met under her chin. There were so many stories that I listened to about what happened when Master's child was the priority. And if you agree with me, let me hear you agree with this. It's time to tell a new story about Black motherhood. All right. So harmful narratives about Black single moms began driving debates over cash assistance in the 60s and 70s. How many remember that? You've been around long enough? All right, so we're going to do the timeline again. Thank you for the timeline, Mama Bug. It's about Black mothers in the storyline. I grew up in the South, and storyline, as I play on the word, there was a lot of storyline about Black people. So Black mothers in the storyline is what I want to talk about. Black women in unequal maternity care. And think of the maternal child health system that began in 1912 and then 1935 with the Children's Security Act. So just think about this timeline and think about where we were. Think about the different programs and initiatives beginning in 1935. Think about ADC. How many know ADC was AFDC before AFDC was AFDC and TANF, right? So way back then. How many remember we were not part of that in the beginning? You all do know that, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone said, mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm going to tell you why we're saying. So keep in mind our 1619 timeline that we've been given for the conference, and not forget our Native brothers and sisters who also went through some of the same things, and we're talking more about that. Remember the 80s, the heroin, crack cocaine. Remember, again, the narratives about black and brown communities, et cetera, et cetera. All of that, just remember for a moment. The large majority of black working women were excluded from the New Deal in 1933 to 39. Social programs like unemployment insurance, old age insurance, now known as Social Security, because they were either domestic or agricultural workers, and many fell deeper into poverty during the Great Depression. So again, we were not benefiting from these programs, but yet we were falling even further and further behind. All right, Catherine Stockett, she came out with the help. How many saw the help? Yeah, this is the time when somebody should have been helping us for real. And that's what they really were saying in the kitchen. Can you believe this crap? That's what they were saying. That's what they were whispering. We need some help for real up in here. All right? So there's other research done by Effie Floyd, which is fascinating, and there's resources here for you when you check out this presentation later. But at one point during this time, states created suitable home laws that targeted black mothers, barring them from even receiving ADC benefits because they were unmarried. In Louisiana alone, this cut off benefits to 6,000 black children, according to that report. But what Effie Floyd says is recognizing the ways in which racist views of black women influence the basic design of current TANF program is the first step to redesigning TANF. So again, as we heard yesterday, you can't keep building on something that wasn't designed to work for the people in the first place, right? So historically, black women with children have been kicked off of federal social assistance programs for reasons such as being unmarried, working in domestic or agricultural fields, among other racist policies, because that's what they were, racist policies. It is important to understand that many of the TANF requirements put in place when it was enacted in 1996, were based on racist ideas about black families that had long been in place under federal policies. And my brothers for Roe, we have to pay attention because, again, how they looked at us as fathers and some of the policies that kept us out is important for us as we talk about bringing dads in. For example, that program in 1935, Aid to Dependent Children, aimed to provide states with federal assistance to single mothers. And the Southern members of Congress pushed to give local and state governments the power to control how the ADC benefits levels and its eligibility, which led again to the exclusion of black children. And great paper I refer you to, but I want to talk now, shifting in time. Let's go into the Jim Crow. Slavery and Jim Crow laid the foundation for the economic, reproductive, and behavior control policies that have permeated later cash assistance programs, including TANF, as we've talked about. Labeling black people as biologically inferior to white people and inherently lazy, promiscuous, irrational, and resilient to pain, white enslavers employed forced reproduction and labor to exploit, control, and punish enslaved black women while maximizing their economic returns. Even after emancipation, white policymakers and employers continued to control when and where black people worked. White landowners' system of sharecropping trapped black people in debt, which their meager earnings could they really pay off. These are two great books that should be in everyone's library, An American Health Dilemma and American Health Dilemma, the second edition, by this wonderful Clayton and Bird, husband and wife, and we've lost him. But this is a quote from Dr. Gager in the book, who wrote the foreword. He says, slavery is America's original sin. A political analyst once observed, and racism is its chronic disease. It's a compelling description of, it's a compelling description and yet insufficient. Dispassionate terms such as chronicity are inadequate to convey the reality of more than 3 centuries of continuous violations of the American creed of equality. Violations expressed cumulatively in millions of premature death, uncounted episodes of human suffering, both physical and emotional, and repetitive assaults on human dignity. To think about racism as a disease, similarly, is a useful metaphor. But again, such a metaphor is inadequate to define the reality of moral outrage that is still, sadly, built into the very fabric of the American society. Race and class, deeply confounded from the beginning, have been among the most powerful structural determinants of the American order. Is that not powerful? The struggle, indeed, does go on. And both of them gave us this schematic, which you may have seen over the years, capturing our time and experience here. But I wanted to lay it out a little different for this conference. And so let's look at Black American citizenship, 1619 to 22, this way. 246 years, right? That 1619 to 1865. We're under slavery. We had 99 years of the Jim Crow, 1865 to 1964, when they finally said, oh, you're human, you can vote. And we've only had like 58 years, you all, of being equal, granted voting rights, considered fully human. Only 58 years. So 403 years of being here, there's still struggle, there's unfairness, there's inequalities, inequities, disparities. Something is really, really wrong. 61% of our time in slavery, 24% of it under crazy Jim Crow, and just 14%. And how many think the last 58 years been so great? It ain't been that great. Hey, it's like we've been living the life, right? So our total time here is just important to see what's been the experience, this 86 experience of heaviness. Since 1964, we've been struggling to transition from segregation and discrimination to integration of Black Americans. Why is it such a struggle for them to treat us right, be right to us? Again, the legacy of slavery, impact on what we do today. Well, we remember this wonderful report, landmark report in 2003, Unequal Treatment, how important that was. They finally said, oh yeah, racism can impact your health. We had to wait till 2003. And some people, you still have to put the report in their head. I had like probably 20 copies of this report I kept with me at all times. So when I traveled, I took several with me because I gave it to folks. I wanted to hit them with it, but I was nice. I said, you might want to read the report. Again, that was Kenn, you all. Sorry, I keep jumping out. Sorry. So, something happened, you all, this story. This is a story of disruption when we're taken from our land, a story of interruption, of family formation, and then this separation. There was a struggle to leave. We were struggling to breathe then, and we're struggling to breathe now. So I want to pause for 5 minutes and share a song with you. If you want to, you can close your eyes a bit. But if not, check out Rian Giddens.
So this song was inspired after reading or looking at an advertisement in a book for a human being, for a young woman. And it just kind of talked about her, and she's 22, young, good worker, that kind of thing. And at the end of it, it was just, as if in an afterthought, it said she has with her a 9-month-old baby who is at the purchaser's option. And it just kind of made me really sad. And then the way I deal with all the stuff inside is I write now. So this song came out of that, thinking about what her life was like and how lucky I am. I've got a baby, but shall I keep him? 'Twill come the day when I'll be weeping, but how can I I love him any less. This little babe upon my breast. You can take my body, you can take my bones, you can take my blood, but not my soul. You can take my body, you can take my bones, you can take my blood, but not my soul. I've got a body dark and strong. I was young, but not for long. You took me to bed, a little girl. Left me in a woman's world. You can take my body, you can take my bones, you can take my blood, but not my soul. You can take my body, you can take my bones, you can take my blood, but not my soul. Day by day, I work the line. Every minute overtime. Fingers nimble, fingers quick. My fingers bleed to make you rich. You can take my body, you can take my bones, you can take my blood, but not my soul. You can take my body, you can take my bones, you can take my blood, but not my soul. You can take my body, you can take my bones, you can take my blood, but not my soul. You can take my body, take my bones, you can take my blood, but not my soul. I've got a babe, but shall I keep it? So this song was this.
So slavery was a reality of black life for close to 250 years in this country, comprised or compared to the 156 years since slavery was legally abolished. 403 years since slavery, but opportunities to parent our own children for only 150 years. And for a long time, generation upon generation, black families were torn apart. Slavery was the enforced system of sustained brutality, including acts and constant threats of torture, rape, and murder. Many overlook the fact that slavery affected millions of blacks in America. Many ignore the countless historical examples of resistance, rebellion, and escape, this resolve that we just heard about. Many disregard the long-tail legacy of slavery, where oppressive laws, over-incarceration, and violent acts of terrorism were all designed to keep people of color in their place. Truth is, something happened when we came to this land. Truth is, something is happening as we live on this land today. Having your history eradicated, your strengths distorted, culture demonized. Again, our Native brothers and sisters know this as well. Just breathe in and out for a couple of moments and just in silence. Enslavement not only inhibited family formation, but it made stable secure family formation difficult and often impossible. Belonging to another human being brought a unique constrictions, disruptions, frustrations, and pain. When we think about incarceration, belonging to the state or the feds. Its unacceptable disparities and inequities have persisted since slavery. There was a great exhibit at the National Museum of African American Culture about making good on the promises, but it talked about Reconstruction. So moving down the timeline to the 1865 to 1877, again, millions of enslaved black people worked to establish themselves and their new independence. The end of slavery also gave this opportunity for African Americans to reconnect with family members that were displaced. And again, this separation of family and community. But the first thing folks did, started to find each other. Families would travel to nearby plantations and farms while placing advertisement in newspapers in hopes of being reunited with their long-lost loved ones. And I thought about families running here and there looking for their loved ones, and many did not find them, by the way. But the pain that they carry in their bodies, the pain that was transferred from generation to generation. Being in a conversation, hey, granddaddy, do you know who your great-grandfather was? How many of you had that moment? You know, I was in my 20s, I wanted to kind of go back and I started asking questions, but it was silent sometime, and it was painful to see. States in the South gradually adopted a variety of methods to disenfranchise black voters. As we know, Jim Crow, segregation laws mandating this separation of the races. The Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist organizations engaged lynchings, beatings, burnings, and enforced new racial order. There's a whole study about burning down black people's home that they built after slavery, forcing them out by midnight through fire. Beginning in the 1870s, blacks migrated in increasing numbers from the South to the northwestern regions, a phenomenon that would ultimately transform the racial geography of the country. And thank you, Isabel Wilkerson, The Warmth of Other Suns, a great read about that. So, according to the Federal Reserve Board, about 15% of rural land in the United States in the 1900s was owned by blacks, compared to just 1% today. And this is recent data from 2019. And the Great Migration shortened lives of blacks who fled Jim Crow South. In this report, it talks about the Great Migration, but the disruptions there, the movement of over 6 million African Americans from the South to the North and Western cities and states had a destabilizing effect on families and is associated with issues related to unemployment, low wages, and poor housing conditions. Also, this data provided by this survey on consumer finances from the Federal Reserve Board said the median wealth of white families is 4 to 6 times greater than the median wealth of black families. We know about Jim Crow. These laws made of a series of laws, rigid anti-black laws. It was a way of life. And under Jim Crow, blacks, African Americans, were relegated to the status of second-class citizens. Jim Crow represented the legitimization of anti-black racism. And Nancy Krieg and her colleagues did a great report, The Unique Impact of Abolition of Jim Crow Laws on Reducing Inequities in Infant Death Rates and Implications for Choice of Comparison Groups and Analyzing the Societal Determinants of Health. We know what the answers are. People know what to do, they just don't do it. And we have data to show. But the study explored the association between the abolition of Jim Crow laws and birth cohort trends in infant death. And again, down the timeline, 1965 to 69, there was a unique convergence of black infant deaths occurred across, where we saw that black infant mortality was higher during the Jim Crow. So the results suggest that the abolition of Jim Crow laws affected black infant deaths. So high effects of Jim Crow laws linger, or the health effects of Jim Crow law lingers as we go into 1870s and 1960s. Jim Crow laws continue to have negative effects on health of black Americans, even more than the 50 years after being outlawed, according to leading epidemiologists. And Dr. Krieger says, understanding health in the United States requires grappling with the history of the country. There it is again. As they say, whoop, there it is again. You carry your history within you and your body. How many know it's true? Absolutely. So studies suggesting that early life exposure to Jim Crow laws, which again legitimize that racial discrimination in the South, can lead to negative health effects decades later. My mama, my papa, impacted. Take another breath. Yay for the brothers. Yay, Wes. So because of the work that I've been able to do here with Rose, over the years with Robe, I understand that the biggest predictor of breastfeeding success is support, and we've heard that over these last couple of days. Therefore, it's vital that we develop culturally tailored interventions that make breastfeeding accessible to black women who are more likely to fall through the cracks. And as a black men and fathers, Robe, all of us across the country, this is where we can stand strong. I can stand with her, and that's why I'm happy to be here today, to stand with you, amen, with my sisters. This is work by Sarah Perel, but I believe we are stronger together, and this conference represents that. Stephanie Devane Johnson's work is great, and her work says some black mothers still reject breastfeeding despite the benefits because of this devastating history. The cruelty of slavery and wet nursing lingers and continues to impact, even kill us today. So the vestiges of forced wet nursing lurk in the community. And you know about the unmothering, that great report of unmothering black women. There were laws and policies that impede black mothers' ability to breastfeed their children began in slavery and persist as an incident of that institution today. They originated in the practice of removing enslaved women's new mothers from their infants to work in wet nursing of their slave owners. How many remember bad black mother? That language justified this separation. Stereotyping of black mothers underlies racial disparities in breastfeeding rates in the present. How many know that is true today? What they think about us and how we think about our families, they're so off. So the protective factors for mom and for baby. And I thought of this for myself and my 4 siblings. I thought of this for my mother and her 9 siblings, because my grandmother was a domestic and she was told not to breastfeed. So my mother did not, my sister never did, my wife's mother never did, her sisters did not, their daughters do not. I'm mad about that. My wife prepared to do that with our son, but she had a challenge in the pregnancy when she delivered. And I tried to advocate for her to help me, because that's what we had decided we wanted to do. But my wife had a C-section, and the nurse says, Mr. Harris, please stop. She's not able to do that right now. And they dismissed me. So exposure to slavery and the conditions of enslavement was a big risk factor. Stealing the milk from enslaved black mothers, dispossessing them, stripping them, robbing them, divesting, depriving them. That's what happened personally for me. So by being denied their mother's breast milk, even the infants were deprived of their best opportunity. And because of what I knew, because I was a breastfeeding educator at the time with Healthy Start, I looked at my son and tears fell out of my eyes and hit him on the head, because I was like, he's not getting something that he deserves. He's being deprived. and I felt powerless, and I'll never, ever forget that. But I know I'm too old now, but if I have another baby now, you know I'll tear that joint down. God knew what he was doing. I'm too old to do it again, but I'll do it right this time, you all. She will be breastfeeding. I'm going to be breastfeeding. Give me the contraption. I brought my own. Yes. But my son lost that opportunity, was removed. And so I want to go through this section fast. I'm going to populate the slide because I just think it's important based on what's going on with formula and what I've learned about the marketing to us, just to put that timeline out there. And when Dr. Justice Lebeg and created Formula Back, it was not, he was sad if he saw what happens today. But just look at that timeline of kind of what happened and when dry milk was created, and then how companies jumped in, Nestle and others in the beginning, and pet milk. Somebody say pet milk, because I want to come back to that in a minute. How many remember the Fultz quads when they were born? Yeah. All right, so that's very important. So remember that they were born. And by the time 1960s and 70s, our breastfeeding rates were at an all-time low of 25%. It's because of all that activity of those decades before. But in the 40s is when those babies were born. But also in 1980, the Infant Formula Act, which is important to read, right? Because this business just unfolded, and it's incredible today. So I think of Mary Louise, and just wanted to call their names out. All of them died of breast cancer, by the way. 3 of them died in their 40s. The last one recently died a few years ago. But Mary Ann died in 96, Mary Alice in 2001, and Mary Catherine in 2008. And when you read about their lives, not just from Skimmed, but read other stories and clippings about the torturous life that they had being marketed for pet milk company. But that's why we have Rose. That's why I put the Rose on this timeline too, because that's my hope for us for the future. So I think about that family, and I think about fathers as well. I think about what they told him. He was already poor with multiple children, but they said, we'll give you a house and some land if you let us have your children. He was poor. They were poor. He took the house. No one tells the story that the land was actually barren. They never grew a thing. Grass, never mind vegetables. But Pete took the deal, as it were. And his wife, who had to deliver in a sub-level hospital, by the way, they didn't honor her because she gave them great children. She was treated badly thereafter as well. So just keep those things in mind across this timeline. But I hope 1946 sticks out for you. And that mad doctor, as I call him, that's Kenn again. I think he's a monster. The more research, the more I feel he was a monster, is what Dr. Fred Klenner was. And so the pet milk company was featured the girls and marketed them their whole lives. Imagine drinking pet milk your whole entire life. But Anthony Harrison, Kwame Anderson has a great article, Using Black Lives as If They Don't Matter, the famous 4 and other serious stories of capitalism and white supremacy. A great read. Also during the time, there was marketing directed toward black folks in the 50s. And the pet milk company, they had the Happy Family campaign, and there's Brother Leonard there. I put his picture up there just so you see. Yes, this black man during that time, it was a great opportunity for him to be working for this market advertising company, and they used him to help create campaigns to market all kinds of products, but the pet milk company was one of them. And it's one of the reasons why my grandmother chose to use pet milk and gave us pet milk. I love pet milk, can I be honest? It's good with banana pudding instead of cream. It really is. I thought I was a little English in my blood, so I drank milk in my tea, so I had carnation in the tea. But when I ran across this stuff years ago, I stopped drinking carnation milk. So that's what it is now, because all of those companies are now one. I can't even drink it anymore. So if you're interested in reading the book, you don't have to, because I'm not promoting her book here, Skimmed, but the 3rd chapter is a good one on the marketing stuff. All right, so I'm looking at my time. So let me just go quickly. You all know this stuff better than I. But again, I couldn't help but all that I've learned about the formula company. But America supports the formula industry, comes at a cost to black folks. That's what I've learned. That's why it's important for me, yes. Black women in the United States use formula at consistently and disproportionately higher rates. So don't forget the formula industry and its quest to exploit the social realities of black women. So that was important for me to learn. And then when I was working as a practitioner many, many years ago, I'll never forget the first time I walked into a Walgreens or Walmart or whatever, and the formula was on lockdown. I said, what an insult. Number one, you got security on the door when I come in. Someone's walking around with me. And when I got to that aisle, I said, the daggone formula is locked up too? Again, Kenn and me wanted to rip open the lock and act a fool up in there. But I was working at the time, so I couldn't do that. But again, those major companies, 3 in 2008, made up 90% of the market share. And I put where these companies are as well, because they're in neighborhoods near our people. And that bothers me that they're near my people. But these 4 are the largest infant formula folks in the place. And Perrigo is really important because they're with the Walmarts, the Targets, and those no brand name but store name. Yeah, that's the company that's providing all that stuff, and the more junk they're putting in them. So when that happened, the formula crisis happened, it was worse for us for many other reasons. And many babies got sick, by the way. They did not make the news, by the way, but I know people that live across the country that I asked, what's happening there? They said all these babies are in the hospital fighting for their lives in NICU. I was like, wow. So yeah, this is the right theme this year. And when you look at the industry, $6.7 million are expected to be made by 2030 in just a few years. At what expense? So don't forget about these formula companies, you all. And don't forget the role of the American Medical Association, because in 1929, they set up the seal of acceptance. So that really made it feel like it was okay because they had the approval of the AMA. I mean, come on. All right. See, I know I'm about to wrap up. That's why I'm getting riled up here. Sorry. Let me just stay cool. Again, infant formula feeding is widely practiced in the U.S., and it appears to contribute to the development of several common childhood diseases, including atopy, diabetes, childhood obesity. As I say, it sounds like us. Our kids, why is that happening? There's a reason why. Oh, let me just get to this. Please let me get to this. And then there's the mammy, because they're still looking for mammy, right? Dehumanizing black women and devaluing black motherhood. Mammy just loved the white children, and she didn't care about her own. That's what they said. And if you look at advertisements and caricatures of those times, that's all that it said. Black women didn't care. So you have this mammy, you have Jezebel, Sapphire, and the welfare queen. How many are familiar with those characters of black women, right? Stereotyping, still in the media today. Submissive, sexy, sassy, shiftless. These reductive depictions of black women. And people have those ideas in their head when our women go into their institutions. These century-old characters drive the divide in breastfeeding rates and the false narratives that perpetuate that black women's experience. And I know y'all loved Empire, but Cookie. Hello, Sapphire. But again, we still see these images. And that's why I tell my son, who's 30, and every man that I work with, you honor women, honor black women, honor your sisters. No. So the truth is, the echoes of wet nursing impact what's happening today. And the welfare queen, just do your own study on that. Many of us were living during this time. You know, under Reagan's administration, there was this story about Linda Taylor and what happened with her, but he used that to code language talking about black women in this country, the welfare queens. So again, in addition to the stereotypes of our black women as rude, verbally abusive, mean and loud, stubborn, domineering, etc., And that was known as the angry black woman, and we talk about that even today. But the welfare queen captured the concept of people getting something that they didn't deserve, which is the message they put out. These women are getting stuff that they don't even deserve, as if what you gave me really helped me. We were on assistance. I know what my mother went through, and and as a kid, you don't know what's going on. You just know mama's mad, but my mama was getting ready to throw down in many of offices. There was 5 of us. You know the kids, when you go to the office, you just have fun. But all of a sudden, we stopped because mom raised her voice. Someone's going to get their butt beat. That's what's going to happen. Because they just talk to you any kind of way. They're like, you're not going to talk to me like that. So I love my mama, absolutely. I will always love my mama. She's my favorite girl. All right, I didn't plan to sing. That's a freebie. That's a freebie. Let me wrap up, and I'm going to skip over. But again, these legacies, and they're part of it, and screaming out is what I find with the women and moms and sisters that I talk with. It's just outrage at this point, okay? And using these characters of us to demean us and take away our femininity, our beauty, our strength. Somebody just needs to say, I'm not your mammy, right? And when I think about all of that, I just wanted to shout out, because of this room yesterday and the room today, as I look at you, there's nothing but brilliance in front of me, you women of color. Give yourselves a hand. So, looks like I have 4 minutes, is that correct? 5, all right. So with my 5 minutes, I'm gonna go ahead and manipulate the slides. If that's okay, say that's okay, Ken, because I have more slides than I have time. So let's just do this. Just watch, and I'll speak out when I wanna say something. Is that okay? All right, so just watch the slides. And William DuBose talked about the mammy character, by the way. He has a lot to say about it. I definitely want to recommend Stephanie Jones Rogers. Oh, all right, you know it. So it's worth examining the historical relationship between black women and white women, because again, in those office interactions, that's what you're coming up with. But that book was powerful for me. This slide I love because Isabel Wilkerson said earlier this year that 2022, and that's why Dr. Bug, this is such a great theme for this year, because again, it was 246 years to 1776, and then 246 years since then. We're right and dead smack in the middle. Moving from here, we have to do better. So you think of 246 before, 246 years since. We had slavery in the past. We've been practicing democracy since 1776. 58 years of our last 58 years, our experience, just 14% of our time, you all. It's time to practice and achieve equity. Don't have time to get into this, but President Johnson in 1965 gave this address to Howard University, talking about the causes of inequality. Very important pieces here. He said there's a problem, too. First, we're trapped. Negroes are trapped in inherited gateless poverty. Second, much more difficult to explain, more deeply grounded, more desperate in its force, is the devastating heritage of long years of slavery and a century of oppression, hatred, and injustice, speaking of Jim Crow. That report, that address is important, and then what led to is that report that came after. Freedom is not enough, he said in that. He talked about the family breakdown, but he also called out this 300 years of slavery and its continued impact. And the report that he commissioned, the Moynihan report, was supposed to address that, but it certainly exposed a lot that was happening. The breakdown in our families. So I agree with scholars, and I argue that there's no study of the lives of slave women is complete without a close examination of motherhood as is defined and shaped the lives and decisions made by slave women. Enslaved mothers and fathers live with constant fear that they and their children might be sold away. My bones chill even in this moment now of the legacy of that fear as it pulsates throughout the hearts of black people in America today. For me, when I drive and I see police lights behind me, I still have this feeling, and I ain't done nothing wrong, and I ain't got no record. But why is that? the long history of separating black families in America and how this trauma lingers. During slavery, endless atrocities were enacted against enslaved black people, from rape to senseless beatings, treating our ancestors like worthless scraps as part of the daily grind. And another gross atrocity I've learned in my research, forced enslaved black mothers to wet nurse. I believe the history matters. As I said, this research for me let me know her milk was stolen, her babies were neglected and denied, her dignity destroyed, her humanity dismissed, her family deprived. Is there not a cause for outrage? Racial justice has its roots in enslavement. Brian Stevenson says, I think there's a better America still waiting. There's a more just America still waiting. There's a kind of community that we haven't achieved yet, but can achieve if we are unwilling to tell the truth about our past. When I think of the children then, I think of the children now. I thank God for Rose. I thank God for this theme, but I say again, is there not a cause for birth justice? When I think of the families, the fathers that are unable to cover their communities, I ask, is there not a cause for birth justice? So this is my ending, but our continuation for the rest of this day. As we celebrate Tomorrow Road, let's remember the urgency of including black fathers in maternal child health, and let's go for black justice for all. We're stronger together. And I leave you with this beautiful face, which represents all of you today. Thank you. Thank you for the rose. I give one back to you.